that he was about 6 feet tall, that he was completely scourged all over his body. He was crucified.
In the late 1990s, Mel Gibson was already a Hollywood legend. Known for his explosive roles in action films and his work behind the camera as an Oscar-winning director, he had it all. International fame, a string of box office hits, and the rare privilege of choosing his projects. On the surface, it seemed like the dream life. But beneath the glamorous exterior, Gibson was wrestling with something far darker. Behind the scenes, Mel was battling personal demons. Addiction, depression, and a deep sense that something was missing in his life had taken hold of him. He was on the edge, not just professionally but emotionally. It's easy to imagine that most Hollywood stars would have the perfect solution: more fame, more money, more success. But for Mel, it wasn't enough. He wasn't just fighting inner turmoil, he was fighting for his soul. It was during this dark period that something strange, almost mystical, happened. In the midst of his pain, Mel had a life-altering moment. He found his faith again, deeply and obsessively. One day, while battling his personal demons, Mel dropped to his knees, asking God for help. He wasn't looking for comfort, but for something far deeper. Something clicked. The man who once felt empty now found solace in the gospel. But it wasn't just the warm, comforting scriptures that spoke to him. It was the intense, raw message of Jesus' sacrifice. "I was a bad guy," Mel once said, reflecting on his past. "My sins were the first to nail him to the cross. So I wanted to tell his story." This was more than just an idea for a film. This was a deeply personal project. It wasn't about Hollywood glam or blockbuster appeal. It was about redemption. It was about Mel facing his own struggles and using the medium of film to explore the depths of Christ's sacrifice. But Mel couldn't have anticipated the chaos and spiritual turbulence that would follow. As he dove deeper into his research, studying scripture, historical texts, and mystic writings, he unknowingly set the stage for something that would not only change his life, but the lives of everyone involved in this project. When Mel Gibson pitched his idea for The Passion of the Christ to Hollywood studios, the response was swift and unanimous: rejection. The film he envisioned was nothing like the typical Hollywood blockbuster. There were no big stars, no catchy marketing hooks, and no promise of a family-friendly rating. What Mel had in mind was something raw and unapologetic, a brutally honest retelling of Jesus' last hours, spoken entirely in ancient languages like Aramaic, Hebrew, and Latin. And that wasn't all. The film would be graphic, showing the extreme violence that led to Christ's death in painstaking detail. Hollywood executives listened to his pitch, nodding politely, but as soon as Mel finished, they made it clear that they wouldn't be backing it. "No one will watch it," they told him. They couldn't see beyond the extreme violence and the lack of a modern hook. They saw it as a gamble, a project that would alienate audiences and fail at the box office. They didn't want anything to do with it. But Mel Gibson wasn't the type to back down easily. His passion for the project was undeniable, and he refused to compromise on his vision. He knew this film needed to be as authentic as possible, even if it meant going against the grain of traditional Hollywood filmmaking. But with no studio willing to support him, Mel took a drastic step. He decided to fund the entire project himself. A whopping $30 million of his own money would go into the production, and another $15 million would be set aside for marketing. He was betting everything on this project. If The Passion of the Christ failed, it would be more than just a box office disaster. It would be a career-ending blow. With no financial safety net and no studio backing, Mel set out to make the film on his own terms. But there was still one more hurdle: the casting. He didn't want famous faces pulling attention away from the story. Instead, he needed actors who could embody the essence of their roles, who would disappear into the characters rather than stand out as celebrities. That's when Mel found Jim Caviezel. Mel Gibson wasn't just making a film. He was crafting an experience. Every decision he made was aimed at immersing the audience in the brutal world of ancient Jerusalem. The film had to feel timeless, untouched by modern life, and it started with language. Mel's commitment to authenticity meant that there would be no English, no modern dialogue. Jesus would speak Aramaic, the language he would have used during his lifetime. The Romans would speak Latin. There would be no subtitles to sanitize the experience. Viewers would be fully immersed in the harsh reality of the story, relying on emotion and the rawness of the performance to convey meaning. This was a bold move, and it was a gamble. Subtitles aren't usually a box office draw, and an entire film in ancient languages was virtually unheard of. But for Mel, this wasn't about making a movie that could win Oscars or appeal to mass audiences. It was about making a film that felt as real as possible, stripping away any modern filter. He wanted viewers to feel the agony, the betrayal, and the sacrifice of Christ in the most visceral way. The next challenge was finding a location that would bring the biblical world to life. Hollywood could have easily built a digital Jerusalem on a green screen, but Mel refused to take the easy way out. He wanted something real, something that felt ancient and untouched. He chose Matera, Italy, a historic town carved into rock. Its rugged terrain, with its ancient stone dwellings and narrow, winding streets, gave the perfect backdrop for the biblical world. It was eerie, raw, and untouched by modern life. But filming in Matera wasn't without its challenges. The weather there was unpredictable. One moment, the crew would be working under bright, sunny skies, and just moments later, dark clouds would roll in, turning the scene into a stormy, chaotic landscape. The cast and crew had to endure freezing temperatures, harsh winds, and storms that seemed to come out of nowhere. It was as if the environment itself was responding to the intensity of the story being told. As filming began, the atmosphere on set quickly changed. This wasn't like any other movie set. The energy was different. Some of the crew members began to feel something they couldn't explain. A strange, spiritual presence seemed to hang in the air. As cameras started rolling on the Passion of the Christ, something strange began to unfold on set. What was supposed to be a rigorous, physically demanding production soon felt like something more, something otherworldly. The energy in the air shifted. It wasn't just the heavy emotional burden of the subject matter that was affecting the crew. There was something else happening, something that many still struggle to explain. The first sign that something was off came during a scene where Jim Caviezel, portraying Jesus, was standing on the cross. While filming, Jim was struck by a bolt of lightning. It was an unexpected, violent jolt that sent him reeling backward. The crew froze in shock. No one could believe what had just happened. Lightning had struck Jim, right there on set, while he was playing the role of Christ. The strike was so intense that Jim ended up biting through his tongue and cheek. What followed was even more astonishing. Minutes after the first strike, lightning struck again, this time hitting the assistant director, Jan Michelini, who had already been struck earlier on the set. Miraculously, he survived as well. 2 lightning strikes in the same place on the same set during the same filming session. The odds of lightning striking twice in the same spot are astronomically low, yet here it was happening in real time. To the crew, it felt more like a warning. Something beyond the physical world was involved. Jim Caviezel himself, who was already enduring intense physical challenges, began to experience the profound emotional and physical toll of the role in ways that went beyond acting. During the scourging scene, the whips were meant to miss his skin, but one of them shifted slightly and tore into his back. The strike left a 14-inch scar, a real injury that would forever mark his experience on set. And as if that wasn't enough, during the crucifixion scenes, Jim dislocated his shoulder. In fact, some of the screams you hear in the final cut of the film were not acting at all. They were real. Makeup artists later revealed that some of the bruises on his body were not makeup. They were real, and they could barely distinguish them from the fake ones. And then there's the eerie coincidence of Jim's initials, JC, the same initials as Jesus Christ. Was this just a coincidence? Or was it something deeper, a sign that he was meant for this role in a way no one could have imagined? Adding to the strangeness, Jim was 30 years old during filming, the same age that Jesus was at the time of his crucifixion. But it wasn't only Jim who felt the weight of this spiritual experience. As filming continued, the entire set became a space of reverence, and many felt the presence of something far beyond the film they were making. Some cast and crew members who had never been religious began reading the Bible on breaks. Atheists found themselves moved to tears during the most emotional scenes. Some even confessed their sins and sought baptism during the filming. When The Passion of the Christ was finally released on February 25, 2004, it didn't just hit theaters. It detonated like a bomb. Hollywood had turned its back on Mel Gibson. Critics had sharpened their knives, ready to pounce on what many thought would be a disaster. The film was R-rated entirely in subtitles and filled with brutal violence that was far beyond what most mainstream films dared to show. And yet, despite all these barriers, something unexpected happened. It became a worldwide phenomenon. Mel had bypassed the traditional Hollywood marketing machine entirely. Instead of relying on the usual press tours and star-studded interviews, he turned to an unlikely source: churches. Evangelical leaders, Catholic priests, and Christian influencers received early cuts of the film. Private screenings were held not in glamorous Beverly Hills theaters, but in church basements and conference halls across the United States. These screenings were more than just a way to preview the film. They became grassroots campaigns, with pastors and religious leaders encouraging their congregations to attend, calling the movie a spiritual event. On opening day, The Passion grossed an astonishing $23.5 million, despite the lack of traditional Hollywood backing. By the end of its opening weekend, the film had made $83.8 million, shattering records and beating all expectations. For comparison, no other February release had ever opened so big. It was clear that this was no ordinary movie. It was a cultural phenomenon. The film's success didn't stop there. Despite the intense violence, lack of major stars, and the controversial subject matter, The Passion continued to draw in massive audiences. By the time the film left theaters, it had grossed nearly $370 million in the United States alone and over $611 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing R-rated movie in history at that time. This wasn't just a success, it was a watershed moment in filmmaking. Mel Gibson had done the impossible. He had taken a deeply controversial, faith-driven film and turned it into one of the biggest box office hits in recent memory. But with that success came a wave of criticism. Critics slammed the film for its graphic violence and accused it of promoting anti-Semitism. Several Jewish organizations, including the Anti-Defamation League, voiced concerns about the film's portrayal of the Jews in the context of Christ's death. Mel Gibson, of course, stood by his film, insisting that it was a faithful retelling of the biblical account and that the focus was not on blame, but on the sacrifice of Christ. The controversy only fueled the film's success. The debates raged on talk shows, in newspapers, and in religious circles. But despite the backlash, the film kept drawing in viewers. In Christian communities, it was hailed as a divine work of art, a powerful depiction of Christ's suffering that transcended anything seen in mainstream cinema. Outside those circles, however, the film was divisive. It pushed boundaries, raised questions, and sparked fierce debates about its impact on religious tensions and violence in cinema. For Mel Gibson, The Passion had proven his critics wrong and had shown the world that there was a massive, untapped Christian audience that Hollywood had long ignored. But the journey wasn't over. With the film's unprecedented success, Hollywood studios began to take notice. In the wake of The Passion, faith-based films started flooding theaters. Films like God's Not Dead, Heaven is for Real, and War Room followed, all trying to replicate the success of Gibson's groundbreaking film. But none of them could match The Passion's raw power. The film had set the bar, and its legacy would live on for years to come. Let's start with Jim Caviezel, the actor who took on the role of Jesus Christ. Before the film, Jim was known for supporting roles in films like Angel Eyes and A Thin Red Line. He was a rising star, but his career was far from cemented. After landing the role of Jesus, he thought it would be his big break. But to his shock, things went in a completely different direction. Despite The Passion's massive success, roles didn't start pouring in. In fact, Caviezel's career took a nosedive. Rumors began circulating that Jim was too religious, and some in Hollywood reportedly labeled him as difficult to work with. He claims that after playing Jesus, he was quietly blacklisted, his career suddenly put on hold. In an interview, Jim opened up about the strange turn his career took. All of a sudden, I stopped being one of the 5 most popular actors in the studio, and I hadn't done anything wrong, he said. I just played Jesus. Yet, despite the challenges he faced in Hollywood, Jim has no regrets. In fact, he has said that if given the chance, he would play the role of Jesus again. For Jim, the film wasn't just a career move, it was a calling. He felt that the experience had transformed him spiritually, and in the years that followed, he embraced his faith even more fervently. Jim began to take on more Christian-themed roles and became a regular speaker at religious conferences, openly defending his beliefs despite the criticism and backlash he received. For Mel Gibson, The Passion of the Christ should have been the crowning achievement of his career. He had proven Hollywood wrong, making a global blockbuster with no stars, no modern language, and no commercial appeal. But ironically, while the film soared to success, Mel's personal life was unraveling. In 2006, he was arrested for driving under the influence, and during the arrest, he made a drunken, anti-Semitic rant that instantly made him a pariah in Hollywood. The fallout from this incident was catastrophic. His career, once at its peak, began to plummet. The controversy surrounding his personal life overshadowed his artistic accomplishments. Yet, those who worked closely with Mel on The Passion believed that the film had a profound, lasting effect on him. They claimed that the intense spiritual journey Mel went through while making the movie changed him in ways he couldn't have anticipated. He became more withdrawn, more introspective, and some close friends even say that the personal and professional backlash he experienced wasn't just about his actions. It was something more, something spiritual. Mel himself has hinted that the consequences of making such a powerful film were not entirely natural, and that the backlash he faced may have been linked to the profound spiritual force he encountered during the filming. For the other members of the cast and crew, the effects of making The Passion of the Christ were just as transformative. Some of the extras and crew members reported having spiritual awakenings, and there were rumors of several people converting to Christianity after their involvement in the film. One of the most profound stories comes from Luca Leonello, who played Judas. He had been an atheist before the film, but after working on set, he felt a calling to embrace Christianity. Years later, many of those involved in the making of The Passion remained silent about their experiences. Some cast members and crew refused to speak publicly about what happened during filming, and the few who do often describe the experience as profoundly spiritual, one they can't quite explain. Perhaps the most mysterious aspect of all is the eerie silence surrounding the film. Those who lived through it know that the making of The Passion wasn't just about creating a movie. It was a journey that, for many, crossed into the realm of the supernatural. In the end, The Passion of the Christ wasn't just a film. It became a spiritual marker for everyone involved. Jim Caviezel, Mel Gibson, and the entire cast and crew all paid a price for their involvement, but they don't regret it. They know that what happened behind the scenes on that ancient set was something far beyond their control. It was something sacred, something that continues to shape their lives to this day.